Welcome back to This Week in Racing, and do you know, ready or not, how I know that racing is just around the corner? Well, it's because that I actually have enough real-world stuff to actually make an episode. And that's why we're going out on a Tuesday, because we've actually had kind of an avalanche of news, particularly spurred on by the fact that it looks like Nascar is going to be the first major auto racing series to return from this global pandemic. Is it too soon? We're going to discuss the pros and the cons of NASCAR coming back and what it means for the sport going forward and how this could be a gigantic flub up. We are also going to talk about some returns in regards to NASCAR of two popular drivers from the past. One from the recent past and one from the slightly less recent past. But they are two welcome returns, and I think NASCAR fans really want to discuss that quite a bit. But we also got some IndyCar stuff to discuss, and that is that Ferrari has made their kind of once-in-a-decade threat that they are going IndyCar racing. But there might be a little bit more to this threat than meets the eye, or at least has met the eye in the past. We'll talk about that. So let's get into it. Busy week, this week in racing. Let's get it on. The Rocket Man will start it off here. Ryan Newman is set to make a remarkable return after a remarkable recovery from a head injury sustained on the final lap of the Daytona 500. Of course, Ryan Newman, I think it's a testament to the safety, construction of the cars, construction of his safety equipment itself, the helmet and such. Just a fantastic story here, and it is a bit of a shame that his comeback is going to come presumably at a race that has absolutely no fans. But Ryan Newman coming back at the first race that NASCAR comes back, I think that is going to be a great storyline and a positive storyline from the first NASCAR weekend back. And yes, Ferrari is threatening to make an IndyCar comeback. They last ran in a race in 1952 with Alberto Ascari at the Indianapolis 500, and they haven't been back since, despite threatening about once a decade. But a lower budget cap in Formula One could mean that to remain solvent within the Italian government, Ferrari would have to find a place for many of its employees it keeps employed currently on the Formula One program. And they have specifically stated that that could lead to an IndyCar and or WEC Hypercar or LMDH program. This is something that I think really needs to be watched here because, just like many of Ferrari's threaten their threats to show up in IndyCar, this could be complete vaporware. But at the same time, if Formula One is serious about their budget cap, this could be a pretty big boon for both the IndyCar scene and the World Endurance Championship. This is something I'm telling you should be watching. And can I get an F in the chat for DTM, as Audi has announced they are leaving the German Touring Car Series at the end of 2020. They join Mercedes and Aston as manufacturers that have left the sport within the past 2 years, and it only leaves BMW as the only manufacturer left. Now, there's a possibility, because there's been rumors suggesting such, that Audi could end up in World Endurance Championship once again with an LMDH program. But we'll just have to wait and see. Audi has been particularly timid about new motorsports programs since the Dieselgate scandal that rocked all of the Volkswagen brands. What happens to DTM? Well, I think, in my opinion, the silhouette prototype race cars are probably going to have to go away, unless, of course, they find a way to integrate the Super GT series into DTM or allow those cars to race. My proposal for a DTM series, I think we need to bring back the touring cars like this Mercedes 190E Cosworth. And by the way, this does prove that, yes, indeed, I do have a diecast for every situation. But I think for a lot of people, even if you didn't grow up in this area, I mean, this car's from 1992. I think a lot of people, when you say DTM, they think of this rather than the silhouette cars. So I think if they decided to change regulations, I think going to something more simple, closer to the real-life road cars, I think that maybe would be more of an attractive business model, or certainly something more attractive from a fan perspective than silhouette-bodied prototypes. Just my opinion. And NASCAR's second return, which was an absolute shock to pretty much everyone involved, is that Matt Kenseth will not only return to the Cup Series, but he's going to be the replacement for Kyle Larson at the 42 for Chip Ganassi Racing. Of course, we know what happened to Kyle Larson, but Matt Kenseth, I mean, he's back. The 2003 champ, which looked like it was the end of the line a couple of years ago when he left the Joe Gibbs organization. He got a couple of opportunities at Roush, but Roush went after Ryan Newman. And now Kenseth is at least back for the rest of the 2020 championship. And now here's the question. What happened to Ross Chastain? Well, I have some theories there because it seemed like he was the front runner for the longest time, but apparently he wasn't even the second choice. In fact, Matt Kenseth was the second choice. The first call, according to Jenna Fryer, went to Carl Edwards, who politely declined the offer. Okay. A lot to talk about here with the Matt Kenseth thing. The first thing is a theory I floated on Twitter as to why Ross Chastain was not chosen for this ride. In my opinion, I think this was a move from Chip Ganassi to get some positive headlines for his sponsors going forward. I mean, let's be honest, no matter how you feel about it, the Kyle Larson N-word deal was a huge PR mark on that whole organization. Whether, and it obviously wasn't their fault. It was, the fault of their driver, but the sponsors, I'm sure the sponsors were definitely not happy with that. So in my opinion, this choice was made because it would get headlines. So you put a former NASCAR champ, a very popular driver in this seat. Everybody is going to be talking about the 42 Chip Ganassi racing car, and not for the reasons that involve Kyle Larson and a racial slur. You're going to be talking about how exciting it is that Matt Kenseth is in. Hey, he's in the McDonald's car. Hey, he's in the Credit One Bank car. And I think that factor has a lot more to do with it than people are kind of putting stake into it. I think had they just gone straight to Ross Chastain, I think people would have shrugged their shoulders and gone, oh yeah, we saw that coming. Okay, Chastain's the Ganassi driver now. But now you have a situation where Chip doesn't have to buy out any contracts that are already signed with Ross Chastain to get him in to that seat. He can still keep him in his development program. He's still got a race to go, at least one race to go with the Spire Motorsports team, which is a kind of a satellite operation with Ganassi. And then you can go full-time in 2021 with Ross Chastain taking the reins of the 42 and go for the championship. Speaking of the championship, a lot of people are suggesting that Matt Kenseth should get a championship waiver and run for the championship. Couldn't disagree more. And it's nothing against Matt Kenseth, but ultimately the guy hasn't run the championship, or the guy was not a full-timer at the beginning of the season. There's no extenuating circumstances. I think there's a way better argument to be made for a Ryan Newman getting a championship waiver than a Matt Kenseth. Ultimately, I believe Matt Kenseth is a fill-in driver, and therefore really shouldn't have a shot at the championship. Now, do I think he's probably going to win a race in the 42? Probably. I think he and Kurt Busch, they used to be teammates at Roush, so I think they already have a good working relationship. They're obviously two champions of the sport. I think that's going to be a very strong program going into the end of the year. But again, I think a championship waiver, again, arguing for legitimacy in NASCAR is kind of a losing prospect at this point, but I think from a championship perspective, even if you have a chase, I think just letting everybody who just joins up mid-season is just asking for trouble. If they didn't give Greg Biffle a waiver to run a few more of those Dash for Cash races last year in the Truck Series, I don't think they should extend that to Matt Kenseth. And that sucks for Ganassi, but ultimately, this is the hand they've been dealt. And maybe they can put all their effort behind Kurt Busch to get that championship. Again, I would not want to see a championship waiver issued to Matt Kenseth because I think, again, for a really long shot, if he gets the championship, again, it's another thing where it kind of stinks, at least in my opinion. And finally, NASCAR is set to return to real-life racing May 17th at Darlington. Now, the schedule that was published in Auto Week, apparently coming from a crew member who passed that information on to them, says that there will be midweek races especially doubles, or at least the season starting with doubles at Darlington and then Charlotte, moving on to Martinsville, Bristol, Atlanta, and Miami through the middle of June. None of these races are slated to have fans at this time. Okay, so this is really big because this is the first major series to come back. IndyCar isn't slated to come back till Texas. That's still up in the air because they don't know if there's going to be fans there or not, and if there's not, Eddie Gossage doesn't want to do it. Formula One isn't starting until July. So the fact that NASCAR is going in the middle of May, it's okay. So let me play it absolutely straight as if, you know, this is 100% going to go exactly the way everybody thinks. So I think it is if NASCAR is trying to get a 36 race schedule in, I think midweek races are probably the only way they were going to do it, especially doubling races up where you run on Sunday and then you run on Wednesday or Tuesday at the same track on a shorter race. I think, again, it's going to be so... I mean, I don't envy NASCAR because this is probably part of the reason that they are starting this early. They're taking this risk is that they have to satisfy TV contracts, which get the tracks paid, which kind of supports this entire ecosystem of NASCAR. If they don't run 36 races, they put some of their own tracks at risk, many of which NASCAR now owns themselves because they merged with ISC last year. So I totally get it from that perspective. Midweek races, again, I think those are the way to go. And I think that, you know, from an absolutely just nation healing perspective, I think having live sports back in some capacity, and that being NASCAR, I think that potentially is a great thing for the sport. There's going to be a lot of eyeballs on NASCAR. The problem is that when you start to think about it, you go, oh, wait, all those eyeballs are now on NASCAR. Well, what happens if you have gone way too early here? You know, even with social distancing, just with the teams, just with the drivers, just with the TV crews, if you keep all the media out, if you keep all the fans out, make everybody else stay home except for the absolutely essential people. If you have Mike Joy and everybody call the races in the studio, obviously they're doing these races locally as well to the, you know, the general NASCAR area, which is the Charlotte area, and then eventually moving out a little bit further as things move along. This is, you know, if there's a big outbreak in the NASCAR community, if a couple of drivers get sick, that's a huge PR blunder. Huge. So, I mean, it's tough because, again, it's not like I have the answers. I don't claim to have the answers. Believe me, I think that, you know, in my opinion, I think you'd be crazy to suggest otherwise, this country does have to open up. The world does have to open up. And it probably has to open up before the 18 months minimum it would take to get a vaccine for the COVID-19. But of course, I mean, I'd be lying if I told you that that's free of risks. Of course it is not. And then you start running into the problems of, well, okay, when do fans come back? Will fans come back ever? I mean, I think they will come back eventually. But when we're talking about in the short term, are we talking like 1-2 years? And then you start thinking about the atmosphere of an auto race. I mean, one of the major things is the crowd. I mean, that's one of the huge aspects of the major races, Daytona, Indianapolis. You go to a sports car race like Petit Le Mans, the fans reacting, the pageantry, the warmth, the color, all of that there is not going to be there for these races. It could be a very empty experience. In fact, I'm very happy that NASCAR apparently is going to continue doing live pit stops during these races, because I think if they had gone to some weird thing where they have to throw the caution every 40 laps so that people can come in for tires and fuel, I think that would have been a ridiculous farce. I'm glad they're trying to keep this as normal as possible, because it is going to not feel very normal. And again, I just hope that they're making the right decision here, because here's the other thing that this could result in. If NASCAR is the guinea pig and it goes completely well for NASCAR, there's no major outbreaks, nobody gets sick, then you start going, okay, hey, we've got a standard now to start bringing everything else back. And then you can start talking about baseball and basketball and hockey, not to mention, of course, you know, IndyCar or IMSA or any of the other series that are currently right now on hold. But again, there's a lot of risks. A lot of risks. I mean, I do not envy any of the people in positioned to make these decisions right now, because in a lot of ways they are no-win scenarios. I will tell you this: I am happy that racing is coming back. I will definitely talk about the first and second Charlotte races, or at least as many races as actually get held. I don't know. I'm guessing media will not be there. Otherwise, I would try to make an effort to get to Charlotte for that first race. But who knows? We're still living in very strange times. I would also like to, as an extension of that, extend my deepest sympathies to the Lazier family, who lost Bob Lazier, the kind of family patriarch, 1981 kart Rookie of the Year. Unfortunately, he actually passed away from COVID-19, so it has affected the racing community as well as the global community. And I hate it for the Lazier family. I'm sure, as you guys know from the Buddy Lazier diecast back there, I've been a fan of that family for a very long time. They're very nice people, and I know that this is a very difficult time for them. I guess we're going to wait and see what happens in the world, and I'm going to be covering it when it comes. Got Indy 500 month coming, the first Indy 500 month of the year. I'm going to be doing two, of course, because there's another one coming in August, but May, going to be very IndyCar, Indy 500 content heavy. I'm excited for that. I've also got a script that I'm working on, still haven't quite got it finished, about the worst race car of all time. I'm excited to share that with you as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.